Okay, so welcome back, guys, to another comic book video. How's everybody doing? Now, with that being said, we're going to do a full story video. A full story video is when I sit down and take a bunch of videos that tell, one overarching story and combine them together into one big video. Now, recently, we had just talked about Legion Quest, a major storyline in X-Men comics, because that one storyline led into Age of Apocalypse, one of the best storylines in X-Men's history. But again, it led into it. It's the whole idea of Charles Xavier's son going back in time, trying his best to change the past to bring in a better future. But unfortunately, he brought in something even worse, a horrible timeline. And so with that being said, today's full story video is only going to be the main storyline. And the reason why I'm saying the main storyline, because it was just X Factor, X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, and Cable. The other X books were kind of like tie-ins for Legion Quest, but I think I'm going to save those for a different full story video. But with that being said, I do hope you enjoy today's full story video. Let's go. Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over the X-Men. And we do pick up at X Factor issue number 108 and 109. Now, technically, this is the beginning of Legion Quest. Now, here's the thing, because even though we are technically starting our coverage over Legion Quest, there are going to be other storylines that take place in between the different chapters of this huge X-Men event that leads into Age of Apocalypse. Now, as we go through today's video, I'm going to begin to kind of bring in other things that lead into this storyline, which of course leads into Age of Apocalypse as well. Now, this two-part storyline is also picking up where we left off when it came to X-Men Unlimited issue number 4. Because in that storyline right there, you had Nightcrawler being able to find out that his mother was Mystique. Now, that was a big moment for Marvel fans, but also for Nightcrawler as well, because that means that Rogue is his adoptive sister, but he also found out that he has a brother, and that would be Graydon Creed. Now, here's the thing, because in that storyline, you had Graydon Creed trying his best to kill off Nightcrawler, Rogue, and also Mystique, his entire family. And the reason why? Because they were mutants. Now, at the end of that storyline, you have Mystique give up her life by going ahead and jumping off a waterfall to basically allow Rogue to focus on saving Nightcrawler's life to allow her children to live on. And so after that moment right there, to the world, Mystique was dead. But here's the thing. Because as we get into the opening pages for today's storyline, we do pick up with Forge, Nightcrawler, and also Rogue. Now, this is Forge kind of forcing Rogue and Nightcrawler to replay that moment in their head to kind of see, to make sure that did Mystique actually die when she fell down that waterfall? And the thing is, they never found a body. And Mystique is a dangerous woman. And so you want to make sure that she is dead, because if she is not, then most likely she will cause problems for you down the road and later events. And so it's Forge saying, like, Rogue, you saw her go down the waterfall, but are you sure that she is dead? Now, for Nightcrawler, he does ask a good question here, because to him it's more of like, hey, Forge, if we knew that she was alive, wouldn't you think that we'll go out of our way to try to find our mother? Now, for Forge, he kind of does shift his focus over to Rogue, because for Rogue, she was the only child that Mystique actually took care of. Nightcrawler, Kraden, did not get the chance to live with their mother as much as Rogue did. And so you have Rogue saying, like, what do you mean by that? And it's Forge saying, well, maybe, just maybe, you are trying to protect her, or there is a possibility that you want to see her dead, because if she is dead, that means you are then able to move on. Is him kind of hoping that maybe, just maybe, when it comes to Rogue, she might release a piece of information that could possibly help him to figure out if Mystique is dead or alive. But of course, he does tick off Rogue and Nightcrawler, and they leave at his office very angry. But as they leave, you have Val Cooper walk into the room. Now, when she does, is her kind of wondering the same thing as well, like, is there a possibility that Mystique is alive? Because that would be pretty wild. But while you have the two characters talking to one another, Nick Fury walks in. He's all like, hey, listen, I got proof that she is alive because there was this embassy. At that embassy, there was a woman, and she had appeared twice on the same camera system and two different locations at the same exact time. Now, for Val's kind of like, okay, cool. There are other people out there who have the ability to shapeshift, but you have Nick say, yeah, but the one right now on camera on the computer, yeah, she had just approved a flight for Avalanche. And so just like that, they now know that has to be Mystique. We got to find her now and bring her in because she is a wanted criminal. And so we then jump over to Havoc and also Strong Guy. Now, they are the only two members to go after Avalanche, except when they do confront Avalanche, it's just him. There's no Mystique at all. Now, you would think like, okay, cool. With Havoc here and also Strong Guy here, they should be easily able to take down Avalanche. No, you actually have our heroes lose in a matter of seconds. And when they look up to see where Avalanche went to, he had already disappeared and left the scene. But now we know for sure that yes, Mystique is alive, and yes, she did allow him to fly into this country. Now, for our heroes, they're kind of wondering, like, where is Mystique going to next? Like, who could be her next target? Because she's doing all of this to go after somebody. And they realize that she's going after Gabrielle Haller. Now, Gabrielle Haller is very important. Here's the reason why. Because she is the ex-lover to Charles Xavier. But also, they have a son together, and that would be David, better known as Legion. Now, when it comes to Legion, back in Uncanny X-Men number 255, that man had killed off Mystique's lover, and that would be Destiny. Now, when it comes to Legion, let's not forget that he has different personalities in his mind, but each one, they have their own powers. But here comes the big catch. None of those personalities had killed off Destiny. It was the Shadow King who was controlling Legion to kill off Destiny. But for Mystique, she does not know that. And so for her, it's kind of like, no, Legion killed off the woman I love, and now I need to kill him. So right now, he is her next target. Now, when it comes to Legion, though, recently he had fallen into a coma. So he's staying at a hospital. But for our heroes, when they do arrive at the hospital, they do confront Gabrielle, and they try their best to explain like why they are there for, like, hey, we are here to protect your son because we believe his life could be in danger. Now, for Gabrielle, it does not make sense at all because her son has been in a coma for a good while. Like, he is no longer a threat to anybody at the moment, but at the same time, it does not make sense why anybody would come after him. Now, before you have our heroes try to explain things to her, you have Wolfbane being able to pick up on the scent of Mystique, which means she is somewhere in the hospital. Now, when you do have our heroes break up, we see her. She's there, and she also sees X-Factor as well, which means to her, her game plan has to change if she wants to be able to kill off David. And her plan works out very well because when it comes to Mystique, she pretends to be Gabrielle. And so you have Mystique being Gabrielle walk into the room and pretend to be a mother who's now very concerned for her child, David. But in reality, that's not Gabrielle, it's Mystique. But Forge falls for it, and he leaves the room to allow her to have some alone time with her son. And so as soon as he walks out the room, just like that, is Mystique saying, cool, this is the perfect time for me to go ahead and kill off the man who is responsible for the death of the woman I loved so much. Except her plan falls apart very quickly because you didn't have Gabrielle walk into the room. And when she does, she's kind of like, whoa, Mystique, what are you doing to my son? Now, you have X Factor also run into the room as well, kind of like, yo, Mystique, let's not go through this plan of yours right now because you're killing off somebody who's basically in a coma. But again, this man is responsible for the death of Destiny, a woman that she loved so much. And with all that being said, before she's able to do anything at all to Legion, her hand swings backwards. And we're kind of like, why in the world would that happen? And the reason why? Because Legion has woken up and he says, oh, Mystique, I have been expecting you, smiling while sitting on his hospital bed. And so as we dive into X Factor issue number 109, we now pick up where 108 left off at. With Legion now being awake, it's kind of like, yo, what can possibly happen here? Because this man holds on to many different personalities where each one has their own powers. But at the same time, it's like he knew that Mystique was coming for him sooner or later. Now, for Mystique, she still thinks she has a chance to kill off Legion, but you have Legion be able to just send her flying away. Now, for Mystique, she now knows that she has to dip the heck out of there because there's no way that she'll be able to go toe to toe with Legion, but also with X Factor as well. So her next goal is to get the heck out of the hospital. Now, while trying to do that, you have Forge give Wolfbane a device. Now, this device will allow Forge and the others to track Wolfbane as she tries to track down Mystique. Now, before you have Legion go back to sleep, this kind of leads into the whole idea of a possibility of him doing something big because he says, Mom, don't worry, I am going to fix everything. And kind of leaving you wondering, like, what do you mean by that statement? But then he does pass out. But right after that, he does fall asleep. But while falling asleep, he's then confronted by Destiny in his dream. Now, this is Destiny telling Legion to tell Mystique what she told him a long time ago. The whole idea that, listen, her death was not on purpose. It wasn't like Destiny said, hey, Legion, I hate you because you killed me or one of your personalities killed me. No, he killed her because he was being controlled by the Shadow King. And so it's Destiny saying, you need to tell Mystique what exactly went down, that technically you're innocent. But on top of that, my death was going to come no matter what because that's how life works. That's how fate works. And so it's her saying you need to tell Mystique the actual truth. Now, for Mystique, it's her right now still wanting to make a plan to hopefully get to Legion. And so she meets up with Avalanche. Now, for Avalanche, he's kind of upset with her because before he had joined the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, this was a man who was able to kind of move around the world so freely without any kind of trouble. But the problem is now it's like he can't. Like, eyes are always on him. But for Mystique, she still believes that him and her should be able to pull off this mission. The problem is you have X Factor arrive because for X Factor, they have been keeping tabs on Avalanche, just waiting for him to make a reappearance. And once he did, bam, just like that, they were called up by authorities in that area. And so now it's X Factor coming after Avalanche and also Mystique. And it does lead into a battle where you do have Mystique being able to get away, but it's her right now just trying her best to figure out how can she kill off Legion, just adapting to her situation. Now, for Legion, he does wake back up, and you have Gabrielle in the room with him. Now, at first, she believes that Legion is talking to his father, Charles Xavier, but he is not. And so, once she does walk out the room and come back into the room, Legion is gone. And the question is now, where in the world did he go to? But let's not forget that for Wolfbane, she had a device given to her by Forge, and that device will lead into the next section. But for right now, it's her just trying her best to track down Mystique. Now, once she's able to find Mystique, is Mystique saying, like, did you really think that I would not realize that you are following me? Now, it's also Mystique trying to express what it's like to lose somebody, like Wolfbane has not. Now, technically, Wolfbane did because she lost Cypher back at the end of Fall of the Mutants. But for Mystique, it's more of, I have lived a long, long life. I have lost a lot of things, but losing Destiny hurts the most. Now, for Mystique, her goal is to go ahead and kill off Wolfbane, but at the very last second, you have Forge appear. Now, let's not forget that between Mystique and Forge, there is a lot going on. And let me explain, because when it came to Uncanny X-Men issue number 255, that was when you had Destiny die. But here's the thing, Forge was supposed to watch over her, but there was a lot going on. And so unfortunately, Forge had no choice but to go ahead and abandon her to help out other people. And Destiny said, go help out other people now. Now for Destiny, she knew that her death was coming. She also knew what her death could possibly do to other people down the road. But either way, when it came to Forge, he left. And then Legion killed her. Now for Legion, he was being controlled by the Shadow King. And so unfortunately, it was kind of like he had no choice there but to go ahead and kill off Destiny. But on top of that, let's not forget that Mystique had pretended to be insane, like literally pretending that because she has the ability to shapeshift, because of that, her mind was broken. But in reality, she was just pretending to be insane, to get in Forge office, to get information that she needed for this job right here. And so it's Forge and Mystique kind of like hating on one another for so many different reasons. Now, while their battle goes on, you then have Legion reappear and being able to stop Forge right in his track to allow Legion and Mystique to have a conversation. And so we see they have their conversation inside his mind. Now, when they do, is Mystique still trying to express how angry she is with Legion? But is Legion saying, hey, listen, before she died, she told me this right here, to beware of times not shared, hearts not loved, and destinies not written. She made me promise to tell you that. And that's really it. It's literally a short conversation. Now, kind of left to wonder what that could possibly mean. But to go ahead and close on today's video, we come back to reality. Mystique is knocked the heck out. Now for X Factor, they are there as well, and they're trying their best to get inside his psychic shield that he had placed around him and Mystique. But for Legion, he says, you need to be somewhere else. And so out of nowhere, he then teleports our heroes to a different location. Then he flies off because he says, don't worry, I am going to fix everything, going to make everything better. And so Legion Quest does continue on in X-Men issue number 39. Now the question is though, what happened to X Factor? Where in the world did they get teleported to? Is the big question right there. But this Okay, so we are finally here. Man, we are finally going to dive back into Legion Quest. Now, here's the thing, because we already covered the first chapter of Legion Quest a while ago. It took place over in X Factor. And really, in that chapter, it was really more the idea of Legion just waking up and realize that he has the ability to be able to bring in a better world for both mutants and humans. But to be able to achieve that goal, he has to go back in time to take care of one single moment that he believes that could bring in this new world that's better for both mutants and humans. Now, here's the thing about our coverage over Legion Quest. Because like I said earlier, We already covered the first chapter of Legion Quest over in X Factor, but today's video, we're going to cover part 2 through 5 and not part 6. And here's the reason why, because when it comes to Legion Quest, as we all know, it leads into Age of Apocalypse. But at the very end of every single issue, when it came to all the different X books leading into Age of Apocalypse, they all had ended on the same type of note. And what I mean by that statement is that at the end of every single book, you had your heroes going through something very big and important. But then at the very end of every single issue, you had your heroes, you had your villains just get frozen in time. And the reason why, because the old world was going away and a brand new world was coming into the picture. Age of Apocalypse. And so that is why I kind of want to go ahead and save the final chapter of Legion Quest with the other X books we still have to cover before we dive into Age of Apocalypse. And so now we're able to get into the storyline for today's video. For me, the main chapters of Legion Quest. So of course, it takes place in Uncanny X-Men and also X-Men, the 1991 series. The rest of the X books come later. Now with all that being said, when it comes to the opening pages for Uncanny X-Men number 320, we do pick up with our X-Men right now, trying the best to get the attention of Legion. Now, we pick up with Storm, Jean Grey, Bishop, Iceman, and also Psylocke, 5 different members of the X-Men, all trying to work together to get the attention of Legion. But that right there is a complete problem, because you have Homeboy right now completely ignoring them. Now, we're kind of left to wonder, how in the world did we get to this exact moment? Like, what led into the X-Men having no choice but to kind of fight against Legion to just get his attention? So now we have to jump back a few hours ago. But when we do, we pick up with the X-Men arriving in Israel. Now, when they do arrive, they are then confronted by, well, Gabrielle Haller. Now, Gabrielle is, well, the ex-lover to Charles Xavier, but also the mother to Legion. And of course, as we all know, when it comes to Legion, he is Charles Xavier's son as well. But either way, when it comes to Gabrielle, she had called the X-Men over because she realized that she needed their help. Because for Legion, what he did was, in the middle of Israel, he put up some kind of black dome. And unfortunately, they have not been able to get inside that black dome at all. Not the military or any other kind of forces at all. And so they're kind of hoping our heroes can find a way to get inside. Now, this kind of leads into a few questions about Legion. And honestly, I kind of like this a lot. Because really, you could use this as a way to kind of refresh fans of Legion. Like, hey, here's everything you need to know about this character. Because you do have Storm say, listen, we know about Legion. We know that inside his mind, he has different personalities, but each one has their own set of powers. And so for Storm, she's wondering, which personality are we possibly going up against? And you have Gabrielle say, my son. You see, while he was in that coma, his mind had completely healed. And so with his mind now being completely healed, he is now thinking sane. And on top of that, he's now trying to unlock new powers that were inside of him. And so that right there is pretty scary, because now it seems like he already has access to the other powers of the other personalities in his mind. But now he's also gaining new abilities as well. And so that kind of leads us back over to the present day. Now, here's the thing, because as we get back over to the present day, we still pick up with our heroes trying their best to stop Legion, to get his attention. Now, we kind of find out that Homeboy has been listening the entire time. But at the same time, he has been completely ignoring our heroes, because what he's trying to do right now is gain enough energy that would allow him to go back in time to hopefully bring in a better future. Now for Storm, unfortunately for her, she has to go ahead and relive one of the worst moments of her life. And the reason why, because it's him saying, let me show you what I am trying to do. Right now, I am trying my best to go back in time to bring in a better future. And so let me go ahead and give you a small example. So he takes Storm back in time to the point where her parents die, but right before her parents die, to allow her the chance to hopefully save her parents. Now, of course, she does fail. But what he's saying that, listen, I now have the ability to go back in time. And so my goal is to go back in time to a special moment. But once you have Storm and also Legion being able to arrive back into the present day, it's now time for Jean Grey to have that conversation with Legion. Now, the conversation leads to him explaining what he's trying to do. And like I said earlier, to bring in a better world for both mutants and humans. But the only way he's able to do that is if Charles Xavier is able to bring his dream to life, where mutants and humans can live together in harmony. And so you have Jean Grey realize that for Legion, he'll go back in time to a moment in time that would allow Charles Xavier to be able to achieve his goals, to bring his dreams to life. And so you have our heroes realize they got to stop Legion. And so this kind of leads into the ending of the first chapter, because you do have Psylocke being able to connect her mind to his mind. Except when it comes to Psylocke, she also connected Storm, Bishop, and Iceman minds as well to Legion. So when he does travel back in time, they also follow him as well back in time. Now, Jean Grey, unfortunately, she stays behind. But honestly, there is a good reason why, because we got to use Jean Grey to warn the rest of the X-Men what happened here in Israel, while the other four are now going back in time with Legion. But now we have to jump over to Lilandra, and when we do, we have to remember that she's still in charge of the Shi'ar Empire, but it's also her now being confronted by Jaff, and I really hope I pronounced that name correctly. Now, for Jaff, he's the actual guardian of the M'Kraan crystal, but that right there is not really important, because the reason why he's here right now is to warn her what he saw happening across the universe, that basically different parts of the universe is now beginning to disappear, being hit with some kind of wave. And so people, creatures, so on and so on, they are now beginning to disappear, like they're out of existence completely. And so it kind of shows that thanks to Legion, what he's doing right now is completely bad for the entire universe. And so that leads us into X-Men issue number 40. Now, when it comes to issue number 40, we pick up in the past, and we pick up with, well, Charles Xavier and Magneto. At this point in time in Marvel's timeline, these two characters were working at a clinic. Now, for Charles Xavier, it was this clinic where he had met Gabrielle, the mother of Legion. And so you still have Charles and Magneto still working at this clinic. But while working there, apparently they had a brand new patient, and his brand new patient is better known as John Doe. And so you have Magneto go check in on their new patient. The thing is, their new patient is actually Legion himself. He did travel back in time, but he had forgotten everything about himself. And so right now he's wondering, who in the world is he, and how in the world did he get here at this clinic? But as we go back over to the present day, we do pick up with, well, Archangel and Rogue, really the rest of the X-Men. And the reason why, because they're trying their best to find Jean Grey, because remember, she stayed behind. She was not able to travel with the rest of the X-Men with Legion to go back in time. And so you do have Archangel and also Rogue being able to find, Jean Grey. And when they bring Jean Grey back over to the new camp, you have the rest of the X-Men figure out what is going on. Like, hey, listen, it's your son Legion, and basically he went back in time, but he also took some members of the X-Men as well: Psylocke, Bishop, Iceman, and Storm. And so you have the X-Men wondering, what in the world could Legion be possibly up to? Now, the whole idea of Legion not knowing who he is also applying to the X-Men as well, who have traveled back in time, but a tad bit different. So, for example, we pick up with those X-Men right now who are just hanging out. And they realize that one, they do have powers, and two, they all know one another somehow. But the problem is they have no idea how they know each other. And now they do know their own names, but again, they don't know how in the world they got their name. They don't know their past at all. All they know is that one, they got powers. Two, they know one another. And three, they came here for a special reason. But the problem is right now, they have no idea what that reason is. And so you have our four heroes trying their best to just live a life in the past until they're able to figure out who they are, where they came from, and what is their actual mission. Now, like I said earlier, when it comes to the other X books out at this time for Marvel Comics, they're also wrapping up and leading into Age of Apocalypse. And so we get a small glimpse of what was happening in one of those books. And of course, it would be Wolverine, because at this point in time in Marvel Comics, for Charles Xavier, he truly believed that he could save the life of Sabretooth, turn him into a better person. And so for Sabretooth, he was kind of like a prisoner at the school of Charles Xavier until Charles was able to fix the mind of Sabretooth. The problem is right now, everyone had officially left to go deal with the whole Legion problem. And so for Sabretooth, he believes that he is home alone, but in reality, he is not. Of course, there's somebody watching over him, and that would be Wolverine. And so, unfortunately, we will not see their battle in this storyline. That'll be in a different video over in Wolverine Solo series. But this leads us over to Magneto in the past. And you have Magneto just still being that good person, working at the clinic and checking in on John Doe. And of course, that would be Legion once again. Except this is the point where you have Legion begin to slowly remember who he is, but also his powers begin to activate in this point in time as well. Because when you have Magneto walk into the room, you have Legion realize that he feels a lot of anger and madness from Magneto. And so you then have Legion being able to access the mind of Magneto. And when he does that, he begins to project all these different images of Magneto's past, all the worst moments in his past, everything Magneto went to. And so, of course, he gets very upset. He's all like, who are you? What are you? And why in the world would you do that to me? And you have Magneto just run away, but you have John Doe, Legion, call out for help because he still does not technically know who he is. But at the same time, though, this is the starting point of him beginning to remember who he is. But that kind of leads into Magneto freaking out. And so with him freaking out, he just runs away. And his main goal is to find Charles Xavier and also Gabrielle to inform Charles that there's somebody else out there who is a mutant right now and currently at their clinic. But with that being said, while you have Magneto trying his best to find Charles, you have Charles walk by Psylocke just on accident. Except when they walk by one another, you have Charles realize that there is another mutant out there who's just like him, being a psychic. But you also Psylocke realize that there's something special about that man that she had just passed by. But either way, you do have Magneto find Charles and Gabrielle, but to tell Charles like, hey, listen, I think John Doe is just like us, a mutant. And so you have Charles and Magneto rush over to the clinic. And when they do, they find Legion. The problem is right now, his powers are still going crazy where he's now projecting different things from his time. And so you have Charles and Magneto wondering what in the world is going on with this character. But now we have to jump over to the present day and we pick up with Charles Xavier. And this is Charles calling in the big guns. And the big guns are really more Cable and Domino, really more Cable. And the reason why, because with Cable, he came from the future. And so is Charles Xavier kind of hoping in the possibility that Cable can go back in time to help the X-Men to stop Legion. But the problem is right now, all the gear that Cable needs is at the the bottom of the ocean. And so unfortunately, he does not have the ability to go back in time. Now, with all that being said, you then had this funny moment happen where, you see, we forget that Cable is technically wanted in a lot of countries. And of course, that would be Israel as well. Domino too. And so for Israel, they're like, hey, that guy right there is wanted in our country. Let's go ahead and try to arrest him. Now, here's the thing. It's not really Cable they're after. They're really after Strife, his clone. But either way, you didn't have our heroes then be confronted by another projection, but this time it's from the Shi'ar Empire. And this is a message from Lilandra. And really it's her saying like, hey, Charles, my love, gotta tell you some bad news. The universe is ending because what your son is doing in the past. Now for Charles Xavier, he's very confused. He's all like, one, how do you know that it's my son is kind of causing the end of the universe? But also, what is he doing in the past that could actually lead to the end of the universe? Now, she does not tell Charles what Legion does in the past that changes everything, but it's her saying like, no, your son is the reason why the universe is ending. And of course, bringing in a brand new one. And the reason why she knows all of this is because she is with a bunch of different watchers from our reality and others as well, who have, of course, been watching over all realities. And apparently they realize that this one is about to change thanks to Charles Xavier's son, Legion. But now we have to jump into the next chapter, which takes place in Uncanny X-Men issue number 321. Now, with this chapter, we pick up with Charles Xavier and Magneto. Now, it's the two characters currently hanging out at a bar. But while doing that, you have the two characters begin to talk about the whole idea of Charles Xavier's dream, hoping that mutants and humans can live together. But for Magneto, it kind of shows here that he already has some doubts when it came to the human race, which honestly, he has the right to have those kind of doubts because of what happened in his past. Like, for example, losing his first child. Now, with all that being said, while you have the two characters talk to one another, you then have both our heroes realize that there is a man who's a veteran being picked on by other people at the bar. So the next few pages are really more just Charles Xavier and Magneto going out of their way to help protect that guy. But now we have to jump back over to the present day. And when we do, we pick up with the X-Men currently working with the Shi'ar Empire to create a device that will allow them to send somebody back in time in their astral form to kind of warn the X-Men who are trapped in the past of what Legion is trying to achieve. Now, while you have the X-Men trying to create this device, you do have the different members of the X-Men kind of realize that they are most likely at the very end of their lives. And here's the thing, it hits them all in different types of ways. Like, for example, Cyclops and Jean Grey, they just got married, but now you are talking about the possibility of their entire marriage, the entire work to build up that love for one another just ending in a matter of seconds. Rogue and Gambit, they have been battling the whole idea of if they should be a couple or not. And now there's no point of even trying to figure out if they should or not. Archangel, he just found love with Psylocke, and now that is also going to end. This man has been lonely for a very long time, and he finally found somebody in his corner. For what? Nothing. But getting back over to the X-Men in the past, it's now really them being very upset about the idea that they still have no idea who they are. It has now been 3 weeks. Like, yes, they know their names. Yes, they do know they have powers. Yes, they do know that Storm is their leader. But that's really it. And that right there is really a problem for them because they have no idea why she is their leader or what is their mission and how in the world they got powers. And like I said, it has now been 3 weeks. And so unfortunately, they're now becoming a tad bit impatient. They want to know everything about themselves, but also each other as well. And they were kind of hoping that Psylocke would be able to use her powers to fix their minds. But unfortunately, she has not been able to achieve that goal. Now, for a brief moment, we do jump over to Magneto and also Charles Xavier. And really, it's more of Magneto wanting to be there by Charles Xavier's side to kind of help him be able to achieve the goal that he wants to achieve. Mutants and humans being able to live together in harmony. That's his main goal right there. But why you have the two characters talking to one another? But now we have to get into a very strange moment in this comic. And guys, I really hate this so much, but we have to talk about it because, okay, you have Legion being able to remember who he is. And the thing is, he begins to pretend to be his own father, Charles Xavier. But then he goes out of his way to confront Gabrielle, who believes that she is talking to Charles Xavier. But in reality, she is not. And so you have Legion go out of his way to assault his mother. Yeah, you heard that right. I honestly have no idea why in the world we have this here in the comic, but you have Charles Xavier being able to feel that something is wrong with Gabrielle, and he realized that they need to hurry back to her. But while trying to do that, while you have Charles doing that, you then have the X-Men who are trapped in the past being confronted by Cable. And you have Cable being able to restore the minds of each member of the X-Men who are stuck in the past. And so with that happening, they now remember who they are, what is their mission, and what they have to do. And of course, it's to stop Legion. And speaking of Legion, we do see him currently right now getting ready to attack Magneto because we see that Charles and Magneto had arrived back to where Gabby was at. But unfortunately, when they do arrive, well, they get attacked by Legion. Really, more Magneto gets attacked by Legion. And so as we get into the final chapter, it's really more just us seeing Magneto fighting against Legion. But for Legion, this is an easy battle. And the reason why I'm saying that because Magneto is inexperienced when it comes to knowing how to use his powers in battle. And so for Legion, he currently has the edge over Magneto. But why you have the two characters fighting against one another, it's right now Charles trying to figure out what exactly is going on here. Now, you do have Psylocke being able to call out to Charles Xavier. And for Charles, he kind of feels like he knows them, but in reality, he doesn't. Really, when it comes to Storm, he does know her because there was a storyline where we have learned that Storm, when she was a child, she tried to steal from Charles Xavier, but she had failed all the way back then. But either way, once he does see Storm as a grown woman, he's kind of like, wait a second, how in the world are you here right now as a grown woman? But also, what exactly is happening here? But as we get back over to the present day, it's really more of Lilandra telling Charles Xavier that your X-Men failed. And as we all know, the X-Men have not failed yet, what it seems like. But here's the problem though, because different galaxies across the universe are just blinking away, which tells her to tell Charles that we have no confirmation yet that the X-Men have failed in the past, but the way the universe is dying, it does seem like yes, the X-Men had officially failed. And so we have not seen them failed yet, but they're going to fail. And so for Charles, he's like, this is the end. And once he realized that, the rest of the X-Men around him, they also realized that as well. Now, like I said at the very beginning of this video, this book right here, this storyline, it leads into the other X books as they all end at the same time, leading into Age of Apocalypse. This is a pretty huge moment for all the X books coming out in this time. But now we have to pick up with Apocalypse. Now, in one of our videos when it came to Cable, we have learned of the possibility of Apocalypse coming back to life. But again, we didn't have full confirmation yet. But here we are now getting that confirmation. And for Apocalypse, he realized what's happening in the past. But apparently when it came to Mr. Sinister, he knew that something like this would happen at some point in time. But either way, for Apocalypse, Apocalypse, his main goal is to kind of use this moment to help him finally win, to achieve what he's been trying to achieve for this world. And so now we have to jump back to the past. And when we do, it's really more of the X-Men trying their best to help out Magneto fight against Legion. Now, when it comes to Legion, he does tell Magneto, like, yes, at this point in time, you are best friends with my father, Charles Xavier, but I seen your future. I seen the man you become down the road, and I know that it's your fault, the reason why my father was not able to achieve his goals. And with my father not being able to achieve his goals, mutants and humans have not really been able to kind of live together in harmony. But if I'm able to get rid of you, then most likely my father should be able to achieve his goal and bring in a better world for mutants and humans. And it's kind of like, hey, that's a huge big if there to take, Legion, but he is ready to take that big if and go ahead and kill off Magneto. But the problem is, at the very last second, you have Charles Xavier get in the way. And so instead of Magneto dying, you have Legion dying. Sorry, you have Charles Xavier dying. I have no idea why I just said Legion dying, but you have Charles Xavier dying. And when he does die, just like that, the entire universe the X-Men universe is going to change thanks to this one particular moment. And so you have Legion, and most of the X-Men, they get pulled back into most likely the present day or into a brand new world. But Bishop, he doesn't. And let's not forget that this man comes from a different timeline. And so the question is right now, can Bishop be the one to bring back the original Marvel Universe? So as we jump back to the present day, but to close on today's video, it's really more of us seeing all the different members of the X-Men in the present day, kind of realizing that, yeah, this is the end. And matter of fact, they all turn into crystals. And so, bam, there goes the end of the main Marvel Universe to bring in the Age of Apocalypse. But we're not technically there just yet. With that being okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over the X-Men. Now, we're still covering Legion Quest, but technically this will be our last video when it comes to Legion Quest. And here's the reason why, because like I said in the last few videos when it came to Legion Quest, where in the main storyline of the event, you had Legion go back in time to hopefully kill off Magneto. And the reason why, because he believed that if Magneto was not around, then Charles Xavier should have the ability to accomplish his lifelong goal, which is mutants and humans being able to live together in harmony. The problem was that when it came to Legion, when he went back in time to hopefully kill off Magneto, he had killed off Charles Xavier instead. And so with the death of Charles Xavier, it had brought in a brand new timeline. And so when it came to the rest of the X books, like Wolverine, X-Factor, Excalibur, X-Force, and so on, all those different X books were also affected by Legion Quest. And they all kind of ended the same type of way, where you had your heroes go through some type of situation. And by the end of that situation, you had those heroes be frozen in time. And the reason why, because again, the old timeline was going away and a brand new timeline came into the picture. But things were done differently when it came to the Cable book. You see, for Cable, he was there with the rest of the X-Men when it came to hopefully finding a way to stop Legion from changing the timeline. And so when it came to Cable's book, it was more of like an actual epilogue for Legion Quest. The other X books was not like that, because all those different X teams or X characters were out there doing their own thing, not knowing that when it came to the X-Men, things were popping off. The only team who truly knew about about it was X-Force. And the reason why, because Cable told them like, hey, listen, we are probably at the end of the world right now. So letting y'all know I could not help out with any kind of situation at the moment. But for Cable, he was there. And so this book was more of an epilogue. Now, technically, when it comes to this book, it does pick up really in the middle of the ending of Legion Quest. And the reason why I'm saying that, because this book is an epilogue, but it kind of gives us a better idea of how each member of the X-Men in the present day is truly feeling about the idea of the ending of the world. Like, how does Cyclops and Jean Grey feel? How does Rogue and Gambit feel? Archangel and Beast, but especially Cable and Domino as well. How does the X-Men truly feel about the idea of the entire world ending around them after doing all that work to hopefully achieve a goal for Charles Xavier just go to waste because the world is ending and a brand new timeline is coming into the picture? How do they truly feel? And so this picks up really moments before you had the entire world end around them, but it does pick up right after Cable was able to go back in the past to contact the X-Men who were trapped in the past. You see, when it came to Legion, when he went back in time, he also pulled 4 X-Men along with him. You had Psylocke, Storm, Bishop, and Iceman. And so when they all went back in time, when it came to those 4 X-Men, they did not remember who they were or what their mission was. They had no idea what to do. And so in the present day, you had the Shi'ar Empire give the X-Men and Cable some technology to use to hopefully send Cable back in time by using his astral form to kind of warn the X-Men in the past, like, hey, listen, I'm here to tell you what your mission is and who you guys are. You are the X-Men and you must stop Legion. Now, when it came to Cable, he went back in time in his astral form. He went over to Bishop. And the reason why, because both characters are out of time characters. They're both from the future. So it kind of made sense why Cable was kind of automatically pulled over to Bishop. But once you had Cable warn Bishop like, hey, listen, you guys are the X-Men. Here is your mission, so get to work. You didn't have the 4 X-Men in the past trying their best to stop Legion. The problem is that we already know they're going to fail. And so getting back over to the present day, we kind of pick up at that moment getting into this issue where it's Cable coming back to the present day. He's all like, whew, okay, I did warn them who they are and what is their mission. And so that kind of leads us into the opening pages of the storyline, because now we're picking up with Cyclops being worried about Cable, Jean Grey, and Charles Xavier, because they're still inside the machine that was given to them by the Shi'ar Empire that allowed Cable to go back in the past to warn the X-Men in the past. And so you have Cyclops right now just worrying about Jean Grey and Cable, but especially Cable, because Cable is Cyclops' son from the future. Now, once you do have Cable, Jean Grey, and Charles Xavier just wake up and walk out of a machine, you didn't have Jean Grey walk over to Cyclops. And the reason why, because while being inside that machine, Jean Grey's mind was connected to Cable's mind. And she kind of realized that for Cable, he is constantly battling against the techno-organic virus. Remember, he got that virus when he was a baby thanks to Apocalypse. And so for Jean Grey, she kind of realized that for Cable, he has to use a huge amount of his powers to keep that virus at bay, because if he doesn't, that virus will take over and he would be officially dead. And so right now, it's Jean Grey saying like, Cyclops, like, it's so sad to see our son technically go through what he has to go through to just survive. And so it kind of leads into the whole idea of seeing how the different members of the X-Men truly feel about the possibility of the world ending around them, the world ending period. Because for Gambit, he does get very angry when you have Cable say like, we don't know for sure if the X-Men in the past will be able to pull off the mission. Like, even though I did warn them, most likely they're still going to fail. And when they do fail, get ready to say goodbye to everybody around you because the world is truly ending. And so for Gambit, he is so angry about it. But for Cable, it's kind of like, dude, first off, you couldn't do really anything at all to help us when it came to sending someone back in the past to warn the X-Men in the past, but also you can't even help right now. So why in the world are you getting in my face? Now you also have Rogue try to get involved as well, but you have Domino try to stop her. But that kind of leads into another argument right there. Now you do have Cyclops being that leader saying, everyone stop. You are all being childish. Like, yes, we already know the world is ending and our emotions are going all over the place. But at the same time, let's try right now to spend these last few moments together in peace and not trying to kill one another. But while you had everybody going back and forth between one another, you also had Lilandra appear. And when she does appear, it's her saying like she has seen different galaxies across the universe right now just being frozen in time. They're going away piece by piece by piece. And so it's kind of like, hey, I think the X-Men in the past failed. If they did, get ready to say goodbye to everyone and everything around you because all of this is going away. And so this kind of leads us into the whole idea of us learning how the different members of the X-Men are taking the bad news at the moment. So for example, we jump over to Beast. And for Beast, he hates the idea of what he's hearing at the moment because right now for Beast, he kind of realized that in his life, he has spent so much time focusing on things that was connected to science. He's now kind of wondering like, what if I had the chance to do things differently? What if I had the chance to experience things that was not always connected to science? Now, for Archangel, it is completely different because for this man, for many years, he has technically been alone. Now, yes, he did have girlfriends over the years, but think about it. He was madly in love with Jean Grey. He lost Jean Grey to Cyclops. He then had Candy Southern. He lost her as well to Karen Hodge, who basically killed her off. And so for Archangel, it's kind of like he had no one in his corner. But then he found Psylocke, and that was only weeks ago. But now you are talking about the idea of like, hey, you're not going to see her ever again. But on top of that, you cannot even say goodbye to her. And so for Archangel, the only person right now he can truly say goodbye to is Beast because they were best friends. They grew up together. They were part of the first class X-Men. And so it's them right now kind of like, hey, buddy, it's just you and me. But now we jump over to Gambit and also Rogue. Now, for me, this was hard to watch. And the reason why, because these two characters have gone through a lot in a very short period of time. And the reason why I'm saying that, because when it came to Gambit and Rogue, they were only on the same team together back in like 1991 and going forward. And so right now, we're in 1995, I want to say. And so in that window right there, you had these two characters go back and forth on the whole idea of should they be together or not. And right now, it's Rogue saying, I just want to spend these last few moments with you, Gambit. It's her asking him a simple question like, hey, Gambit, have you ever thought of the idea of having a family? And you have Gambit say no, but try to like stay away from her. And the thing is, he realized that he's being a complete jerk. And so it's now him wondering like, okay, you know what? What can I do to fix things before the world does end around us? Because what I said to her is completely wrong. And so now we jump over to Cable and also Domino. Now in the Cable series, we kind of got the idea of these two characters finally dating one another. We did learn over time that for Cable, he always kind of had feelings for Domino because she was always in his corner, but he never made that move. But then he did. It was kind of like, okay, cool. Can these two characters finally confess their love for one another? But you have the two characters still not really being able to confess that love like they should at this moment right here. But when we jump over to Cyclops and Jean Grey, things are a tad bit different because for these two characters, they just got married, right? Like They got married not too long ago, had their whole lives planned out for themselves, but now being told like, hey, unfortunately, the world is ending around you. So this is the end for you guys as well. And so for Jean Grey, she's thinking of her nephew, her niece, her parents, but also her sister, who also died by the hands of Cameron Hodge earlier in our coverage over the X-Men. But she's also thinking of Logan because, again, Jean Grey does love Cyclops, but she also loves Logan as well. And so for her, it's kind of like, man, I just wish I could say goodbye one last time to Logan. And for Cyclops, he is not even going to argue with her about that at all. But again, it's now time for them to kind of spend these last few moments with one another. But they're then confronted by Charles Xavier. And for Charles Xavier, it's really more of him kind of wondering like, hey, did I ever make a difference in the world? Like with the X-Men, with me trying to bring peace between mutants and humans, to allow them to try to live together in harmony. Did I make a small difference anywhere across the world? Now, for me personally, no, because as we saw, it only got worse and worse over time. But for Charles Xavier, he was still trying to achieve that goal. And so with all that being said, at least he was trying. And so for Cyclops and Jean Grey, they kind of tell him like, you did make a difference in our lives. And for me, that's correct, because if you think about it, some of these X-Men, they didn't have that father figure around. Charles Xavier was that father figure. For example, Cyclops, or even Bobby Drake, because as we saw in the earlier parts of our coverage of the X-Men, Bobby's father's a complete jerk. But then you have Cable walk up. Now, for me, this is a great moment because now it's Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Cable being able to sit down with one another to have a conversation. And this conversation to me is really important. Let me explain why. Because, okay, there was a storyline called The Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix. And you had Cyclops and Jean Grey's souls be taken out of their bodies and pulled into the far future. And their soul to kind of place into two bodies in the far future to allow them to have the chance to raise a baby known as Nathan, young Cable, into the man we all know and love today. And so with that being said, they raised young Cable in the future, but they had different names, Slim and Red. And so for Cable, at first, he had no idea that the people who had raised him was actually Cyclops and Jean Grey. But in recent storylines, he began to figure out that, oh, Slim and Red is Cyclops and Jean Grey. In some kind of crazy way, those two people were able to raise me in the far future. That right there is pretty wild. And it's him saying right now, thank you, because at least with that, you guys gave me the chance to have a family. And I'm like, man, the feels in this storyline. Now, you didn't have Domino walk up. And so this is the moment where we could technically say like it's Cable and also Domino being able to finally put their feelings out there and say, I like you, you like me, you know what? Let's go ahead and just kiss. And you're like, oh my God, this is all great. But the problem is the world is still ending around them. And so just like that, everything around them begins to freeze in time. The old timeline is going away and a brand new timeline is coming into the future. And now we are technically ready to dive into Age of Apocalypse. And so with that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.